Nerds! Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast. Feeling financial frostbite? Let NerdWallet cure your January bank account blues. Snuggle up with smart strategies for financial success, even as the winter winds blow. Learn about budgeting tips to melt away your post-holiday debt, whether you should buy a home now or wait for mortgage rates to warm up, and how you can build a cozy credit score. NerdWallet's in-house experts explore practical strategies to help you make smarter financial decisions, from growing wealth to funding big purchases. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app. Future you will thank you in 2024.
Happy holidays. Welcome into the latest episode of the Show Before the Show podcast, the official podcast of minor league baseball. We have, I don't know, I guess this is our last episode for 2023, right? We're not doing one next week. Like, people with real jobs, you all don't work next week. You just like go eat bonbons, and that's always my mom's comparison for something luxurious. Like, they're sitting around eating bonbons. Like, I don't even know what a bonbon is. Anyway, this is all to say, isn't this our last episode?
Yes, it is our last episode of 2023. I have a picture of like what bonbons are, but I don't think that's what they are at all. Like, just like little, almost like Kix cereal.
Is it a cookie or is it like a candy?
I always pictured it as cereal, and I don't know why that is.
Apparently, it could be like anything. It's like a cookie or okay. A bonbon, according to Wikipedia, so you know it's real, is a small chocolate confection. Ben, have you ever had a bonbon?
I mean, I probably had something that in retrospect could be classified as a bonbon.
Yeah, that's
never fair. In my life have I been like, oh, you know what would be great right now? A bonbon. Or even like a little kid, I was like, could I have a bonbon? No. Like,
when are we getting bonbons next? Why don't we have any bonbons in the house? Well, this is a very productive start to this episode.
Go through the supermarket aisles like, Mommy, the bonbons. No, we already have bonbons at home.
Why can't we stop at the bonbon section? It's the type of mature start to this podcast that you've come to know and expect. As we welcome you into the latest episode of the official podcast of minor league baseball. My name is Tyler Mon, Sam Dykstra and Benjamin Hill in New York City, as we have arrived at the final episode of 2023. And we got a fun one in store for you today. Fellas, first off, how are things?
Yeah, things are good. It's I am currently in the Frank Robinson room overlooking Radio City Music Hall with its big tree, knowing that the 30 Rockefeller Center tree is beyond that. So if you hear some honking going on in the background right now, that's just good old 6th Avenue traffic. But there's a spirit and an energy in the city around this time of year. And I always try to pick that up and carry it with me. I know some people don't like being in Midtown right now because it's so hectic and nuts, but like, listen, people want to come here, and I always enjoy that. Like, living in the place that people want to come to.
Ben, you are a father who now gets to kind of experience like more and more year after year. Harry will get more into the holidays, into opening presents, into all of that stuff. How's that been?
Yeah, it's great. I love it. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's true. The holidays in general have just become a lot more fun when you experience them through a kid's eyes. And, he turns 3 in February, and this is kind of the first round of holidays we've had where he, some of the concepts might be still quite vague to him, but Santa Claus and Christmas trees and decorations and presents, like, he's excited about all of it. And it's the first time I've really been excited about getting him presents. Like, in the past, it was like, I don't need to get him anything. These, like, the gifts would be boring, and all these relatives give him books, and we live in a lot of books, a lot of other stuff, and we live in an apartment. We don't need this stuff. But this is the first year I've kind of, in my own shopping, I've been like, ooh, I'm going to get that for Harry. Like, he's going to like that, or, I want him to associate that with me, or this is something I want to encourage. Like, we got yesterday we had a discount at the MLB shop available to employees, and I got him a hat and a jersey, Phillies jersey. Even though he's a Brooklyn kid, I grew up, obviously a Phillies fan. So what am I gonna do? Like, buy him Met stuff because he was born in Brooklyn? No, it's not gonna happen. Encouraging Phillies, and I'm totally prepared, and in a certain way would encourage if he becomes a baseball fan, and if he says like, no, Dad, like, I've never lived in Philadelphia, I've never been to your backwater burg, like, I'm a New York guy, so I would respect that. I'd even buy him Mets or Yankees gear if he became a fan on his own, but for now he's getting the dad influence with Philly stuff. I also got him a wallet. That's something he's really into because when we go outside, he wants his wallet. Dad always has his wallet. He wants a wallet with a Metro card and some money and an ID. I don't know. Toddlers don't really have ID, but we'll make him an ID.
I like the idea of like a preschool ID of like he's got like his his own little tiny headshot. That sounds pretty
signature.
Great. That he has to print on there.
Yeah.
Well, we are really excited to wrap up 2023 with a very fun episode idea in our final edition of this calendar year, and that is we're going to give you our 5 favorite things from minor league baseball in 2023. Or it could be, I guess, baseball at large-ish as well, but tangentially connected to minor league baseball. And then at the end, we're going to give you some favorites that are beyond just the baseball side. But Sam, I believe, has brought up his, Bletchley Park inspired code spewing random order generator. This is not something that Sam just figured out on Google. There's like a big old timey machine behind him, and he has to like plug the cords in to each thing like an old switchboard. It's very impressive work, Sam. I'm pretty blown away that you had the time to build this thing.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is it only gives me the names one letter at a time. So we could be here for 45 minutes. Just chat amongst yourselves. No, it's random.org.
I mean, you can infer the names pretty quickly. Even from one letter, I think we're okay.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Unless it gives you like vowels first, and then it's like, oh man, an A. What is this going to be? I don't know. Is it
only one of our names has an A?
Benjamin. Well, Benjamin has an A.
Benjamin.
On has an A.
On, yeah, it's first and last names, letters randomly.
Yeah. Oh man. All right, Sam. Apparently it's random.org. Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Which I am told is a secure form, so nobody's going to ever be able to find this.
Nobody's hacking our random 3-name order infrastructure. That's good.
I feel like this is, I can't remember, what was the order of the gratitude guys?
I was last. That was, I believe that was Sam, Tyler, Ben.
Okay. Well, it's Sam, Ben, Tyler this time.
Ah, okay. That's good.
Somehow I keep going first.
What a surprise.
Trust me, I would have preferred one of you guys going first, but we have to stick to the decree of random.org.
It is binding. This is not something that we can take like an independent arbitrator. This is random.org is a binding agreement.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, I will count down my 5. I'm actually going to start with, I think, something that's like kind of a free space for all of us, which is just the podcast in general. But a couple episodes I wanted to shout out real quick. One being the gratitude guys. We got some good feedback on that from listeners who said they really enjoyed getting to hear our backgrounds. And that was just a lot of fun to learn a little bit about you guys too, that, we know each other pretty well, but going even deeper than what we already knew, that was great. Seinfeld night episode was a lot of fun. Equally as fun was like what we didn't record, just going beyond and quoting Seinfeld for like half an hour after the interview was over. Our fan episode was so much fun, getting people who listen to this show and know the show really well onto the show. You could see the excitement every time somebody popped up on Zoom and got to chat with us, and we got to chat with them. We were equally excited. And the broadcaster's favorite calls, that was another one that I think, the industry was super excited to hear from other people or be included in that. And that's something we can do every year. I mean, there's 120 minor league teams, all with broadcasters who deserve their chance to show off their favorite calls. So that's something we'll be looking to bring back next year. So that's my free space. Number 5 were stories from the Arizona Fall League, but specifically some uncovered gems from that league, because the AFL, we know it as a prospect graduate school. It's usually a lot of big names there. And, it's exciting to talk to guys like Colson Montgomery and Reggie Crawford and Kyle Manzardo and all those guys. But like sometimes there are guys who you think are at the end of a roster who actually end up standing out in that league as well. And 2 of them were Carter Howell, a Giants prospect, and Zach Penrod, a Red Sox pitching prospect. Carter Howell was somebody who I was talking to him about his background a little bit, and that ended up leading the story. He went to Division II ball and he only got one offer from Augustana University in South Dakota. So he accepted it, played there, ended up going to the Giants. He wasn't selected, but the Giants were the only team to ask him to go to Pro Ball. So he signed with them. Now, he just finished up the year in the AFL. He's just a guy who really knows how to make the most of his opportunities. Same thing with Zach Penrod. He was signed out of Indy Ball by the Red Sox in the second half of the season, helped the team win a championship there, then got sent to the AFL because they just needed an arm and showed out in the AFL. It's not top 30 quality stuff. I mean, it's kind of an average fastball, and he has a really good changeup and some other secondaries, but he's a guy who continually answers the bell. And I like finding out about those guys. I like talking to those guys about their stories. So go circle back on those if you haven't read them before, on Carter Howell and Zach Penrod. Number 4, this isn't something I like personally experienced, but it's just something that's going to stick with me from the year in general, is the aggression of promotions. I feel like a lot of big names this year really got pushed aggressively up the minors. The number one example of that being Ethan Salas, the Padres catcher, was signed in January at 16 years old, ended the year at Double-A in the San Diego Padres system. A lot of that was just straight up aggression from the Padres. They wanted a lot of their top names in San Antonio at once. But the fact that he was 17 and was even considered for that was something really special. You look at Jackson Holliday climbing 4 levels in one season, ending at AAA, and there were some rumblings about him like still working out in Sarasota in case Baltimore needed an infielder for the playoffs. Like, he was still around. They were considering him, at least, or thinking about it, as you would with anybody at AAA. So seeing guys answer the bell like that was really, really special for me this year, and something that I'm going to carry with me moving forward. I think that might be a trickle-down effect of the prospect promotion incentives. If you have a guy on your opening day roster and they win Rookie of the Year or they win MVP in their first 3 years, you get an extra draft pick. And I think we're starting to see that trickle down a little bit. That's something to watch moving forward. Number 3, these last 3 are all going to be involved with the MLB Pipeline Game of the Month. I went to 5 of the 6 this year. I love being on the ground. I love talking to people, seeing these guys up close. After writing about them for so long, or seeing them on a lot of video. And one great thing about the minor leagues is access is tremendous. But number 3 was just a game I got to see before the Pipeline Game of the Month in April. It was when Jordan Lawler hit a walk-off single in the 10th inning for Double-A Amarillo, playing in Hodgetown. But it was part of a 10-run comeback for the Sod Poodles. You have to think that stadium, it's extremely hitter-friendly. No lead is ever safe, but like, after hearing that for years and years, they've been there since 2019, hearing about how hitter friendly it was, and then you're still watching a game and thinking they're not going to come back from this. This game's pretty much over. And then seeing them do that, Jordan Lawler hit a home run as part of the big comeback, and then walked it off in the final inning. He was the big name to know in that series against Frisco. Evan Carter was also there. He ended up being part of the World Series champs with the Rangers, but like, Jordan Lawler being the home guy, playing in his home park, he was somebody I was really excited to see. And then to see him pull off those heroics was really special. Number 2 is an interview I did here on the pod with Dylan Cruz. And the reason I bring that up is, again, just going back to that access situation where Dylan Cruz was one of the best college performers we've seen in recent years at LSU, helped them win a College World Series, won the Golden Spikes Award, was putting up crazy numbers all season long, was considered at the number 1 spot for the Pittsburgh Pirates. That ended up going to his teammate Paul Skeens. Cruz goes number 2 to the Washington Nationals. They become the first pair of teammates to go 1-2 in draft history. And, this guy's seen it all. And as far as it goes as amateur ball, speaking of getting pushed aggressively, he ends the year at Double-A Harrisburg. I was in Binghamton when Harrisburg was there for the MLB Pipeline Game of the Month, and I wanted to get him for the pod. I just wanted to sit down with him, see how it was going to go. And it was a really good conversation, and it was a real easy conversation. I think part of that is you can see how he deals with the media, and he's been around the media for a long time, being in the SEC. But, after hearing how big of a player this guy could be, to just get him one-on-one in a very relaxed environment, and for him to be pretty candid in that interview, was just what is special about the minor leagues to me. So that's number 2. And number 1 for me has to be my favorite story I wrote this year about Elly De La Cruz. when I went to the Pipeline Game of the Month in Louisville. Elly De La Cruz, I know he didn't do as well as everybody would have hoped in the major leagues, struck out a whole bunch, but I still think he was the most electric player in the minor leagues this year. The guy could run like lightning. He could hit the ball as hard as anybody at the lower levels or even the major league level, to be honest with you. He could switch hit. He could play a really dynamic shortstop or third base wherever you needed him. And then hearing all these stories about him and then getting to see him was really neat. But one of my favorite things to do in baseball is just ask people their favorite stories about guys who are that legendary or could be that legendary. And you ask anybody about Elly De La Cruz, and they all had a story about him. One of the stories came from Andrew Abbott, who ended the year with the Reds and was a pretty good pitcher for them. He said he watched him hit a homer at Double-A Chattanooga, and you could see both dugouts immediately sprinting to the TrackMan data because they wanted to see how far it went out, and just to witness, a ball, see how far it went. It was an estimated 512 feet. Who knows how accurate that is, but it seemed like both dugouts were laughing. Chucky Robinson told a story about how Elly De La Cruz tripled in late April and made it to the bag in 11.19 seconds, which was the second fastest home to third time in AAA this season. And he thought he was jogging. Because he's Elly De La Cruz, he's so big. And then getting to talk to Elly about that and, what makes him so special. I don't know. It came together really, really well. Between sourcing, between fun stories, these guys are going to make it big. I believe Elly De La Cruz is still going to be a superstar. He just needs more access to major league pitching. He's done this before. So to get him before the people of Cincinnati really got to latch onto him and experience him for themselves, I hope people read that and got excited for the next generation of Reds. I think they're about to turn a page, and Elly De La Cruz is a big part of that, but being able to participate in that story and help tell that story was one of my favorite things I do in the minor leagues. And that was just the latest perfect example of it. So those are my five favorite things. It's a lot of like first person stuff, a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed doing and sharing with people, but yeah, so there we go. So Ben, you were up next.
Yeah, well, those were Sam's five, but then there was the heretofore unknown free space, which
I just thought that would be like shared amongst us, kind of like bingo.
Means we only all need 4.
Yeah, someone hasn't been at the bingo hall lately. It's 4 in a free space.
Okay, well, fine. I'm sorry, I'm not old like you guys.
That's good.
Not been to the bingo hall. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm just catching shots over here for no reason. I had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
Sam.
I played bingo on my 21st birthday. True story. Went to a local bingo hall and played some bingo. Yeah, but it tied into Sam's free space. I mean, well, first of all, this concept, this is not some original concept, but doing this on the podcast was kind of an offshoot of the fact that I did something similar in my newsletter this week, which will be out, on Thursday, and probably a standalone MILB.com article on Friday. So I'm going to try not to be totally redundant with that. But one thing I did put in the newsletter, among my favorite things was, the podcast in general, yes, but also the episode Sam mentioned specifically when I tried to choose one favorite. I went with the broadcaster's favorite calls. And part of that for me is having been on the road for so many years during the season. I often just know the broadcasters best, and then also cross paths with certain broadcasters, during away games where they just happen to be the opponent. And I've just gotten to know so many through the years and really respect the hustle and grind of the whole occupation, which Tyler obviously knows firsthand. And I thought that article was great just to showcase 10 current minor league broadcasters, and obviously that is something we can do again. But beyond that, what am I going to go with? I mean, I guess I'll start, and these aren't really ranked, but with number 1 or number 5, if we're counting down, I'll say number 1. I go with the Ballpark Guides, the minor league Ballpark Guides. I've been doing this job a long time, but a project of that scale and scope we have not done before. And if you're not familiar, that's a standalone ballpark guide for every current minor league facility, 119 in all. And people can use them just to learn more about a particular ballpark and team, but also to plan road trips. And, the homepage for the Ballpark Guides, which is MLB.com/Ballpark Guides, I believe, but just Google, minor league ballpark guides. There's an interactive map. You can look at a map of every minor league team in the United States and click on each and try to, devise your own road trip. And it's been great to get feedback from people saying, that was really helpful. And after a holiday break, one of the key to-do list items for me in 2024 and several coworkers, but certainly for me, will be to update the Ballpark Guides, because as you guys know, as a lot of listeners know, there's a lot of change in the world of minor league baseball. Haven't been a lot of flat out new ballparks, but when it comes to food items, sometimes when it comes to logos, when it comes to group areas or seating areas, et cetera, you cannot do a project like this and let it sit too long before it becomes, if not irrelevant, at least somewhat unreliable in terms of the information. So going to spend a lot of time updating those as well. Number 2, let's go with, we talked about, my son Harry and how I've been enjoying, holidays with him. Got to take him to his first minor league game. We talked about that a little bit on the podcast, but taking him to a Brooklyn Cyclones game and having that be his first live baseball experience. I mean, he was predictably more into hot dogs and French fries than actually sitting there and watching baseball, but he loves Coney Island, where the Brooklyn Cyclones are situated. So he loves going to Coney Island in any context, with the beach, the water, the rides, the food, and the fact that there's a minor league team there in his favorite place, I think really bodes well for the future of going to more Cyclones games. And we have a picture of him in our living room at the game, and he sees it and says, like, I want to go to a baseball game. He said that today, even though when he was at the game he didn't seem like that into it, but it's a memory he has now. And I think next year, when he'll be 3 during the season, it'll be just that much better, as he has even more context for baseball. And of course, I'm going to encourage his minor league fandom, and that kid has the best wardrobe of any 2-year-old I know, because of all the minor league t-shirts I've been able to buy him on my road trips. And it has made me aware for the first time, like going to team stores, I'm like, oh, I hope they have, I was looking for 3T size this summer, but not every store had, toddler sizes. So, that's not something I'd write about or like complain about openly. But, when that was the case, I was like, oh man, I can't get Harry a shirt. There's no toddler sizes. So if you run a team store, please do your best to have toddler sizes, because we got to get the youth, got to start them young on their minor league baseball journeys. Number 3, I just want to give a shout out, to who I consider my MVC, most valuable colleague, Josh Jackson, and working with him all year long. It's not like the first year I've worked with him, obviously, but especially as we've gotten into a rhythm with the newsletter. Not only does Josh do a segment in my weekly newsletter every week, Josh Jackson Interrupts, where he plugs his segment on this podcast, Goes to the Minors. He also produces the newsletter, and that's a lot of work, because I can be wordy and have a lot of pictures. And so if you enjoy reading that newsletter, Josh plays a huge behind the scenes role putting that together, and that is indicative of his job as well. He has a few public facing things, and he writes some stories, but he is huge behind the scenes and making MILB.com and MLB Pipeline run. And he's really great at those things. But my hope for him in the future is for him to have as much time to flex his creative muscles as possible. And any chance I can get to work with Josh is really enjoyed. So I want to give a shout out to Josh Jackson, because he's all of our friends and he does a lot. And as I said, a lot of it's behind the scenes that people might not realize, but it's really important. And I'm trying to think of now a way to insult Josh somehow, or at least say something related to his persona of a dude who emerged from 1908 and now lives his life in rural Maine, as if it's still the Theodore Roosevelt administration. But whatever.
I mean, I gotta say, his transition from the typewriter to the current laptop took a little longer than we expected, but he got there in the end.
It did, but he still prefers the telegraph as a primary mode of communication, and he's always like getting mad at me because my Morse code is a little sloppy, and
Well, the weird thing is, like, he ends lines in emails with "stop."
Yeah,
which is like you don't You don't need to do that, Josh. Like we all get it the same in Outlook. It's not limited by characters.
Yeah, that's a goal for Josh in 2024. Stop. Like, you just hit a period. We know. But that was number 3. Number 4, I'll use this as just kind of a stand-in for a larger concept. But when I'm on the road, it's always been a priority, but especially in recent years, for me to do profiles of longtime ballpark characters. So I did a lot of them this year. And one of the things I really like about them is it's often the first and likely only in a lot of cases, more national profile these people will get. So I really do feel a sense of responsibility in putting them together. And often, as much as Facebook is not something I use anymore, and we find to be a less than ideal social platform in a lot of ways, sometimes when I write these stories about beloved ballpark characters and the team shares it, it's just so heartwarming for me to see that I've provided a forum for people to just provide their own memories of this person or just to celebrate this person, and to get response from the people I profiled about how much it meant to them is really important to me, to get that kind of feedback. So one example of many is Chester the usher in Tacoma. He's been an usher for the Tacoma Rainiers for many years, but he grew up in Brooklyn, actually not far from where I live or where Sam lives, and was a huge Brooklyn Dodgers fan. That stereotypical 1950s Brooklyn childhood, listening to Vin Scully, getting to the game whenever possible on public transportation. And he just shares that love of baseball every day at Cheney Stadium, the home of the Rainiers. He, always has balls to give the kids that he hides in cups of peanuts. And he often brings old newspapers and magazines, from the 50s and 60s to share with season ticket holders based on their interests. And he just fosters a love of baseball every day. And I love being able to celebrate those types of characters in the minors. And that was number 4, correct? And so here's number 5. And I'm just looking at my list because we could all, make this our top 30. Number 5, I'm going to say in Columbus, Ohio, Pho Hoang Vietnamese restaurant. I don't know if that's exactly how you pronounce it, but to me, kind of like using Chester as a stand-in for a larger concept. Often on the road, I don't have the time to just go to these, maybe like if a place someone recommended, it's just kind of catch as catch can. And Columbus was the last place I visited this year. On a Sunday afternoon, I was going to fly back home that night. My flight was canceled, and I had to scramble. I was in a parking lot after the game for better part of 2 hours, figuring out my plan of how to spend the night and get home the next day. And it was stressful, but then I cleared it up, and then I was like, time for some dinner. And I just, in my GPS, just typed in Vietnamese near me. I love Vietnamese. And it was this kind of rundown strip mall somewhere in Columbus, Ohio, completely nondescript location. And inside, there was more people than I would have thought. It had a warm, generous atmosphere inside. The food was really good. Spring rolls, some, pork chops with rice, salty lemonade, which I always get at Vietnamese restaurants. It's often on the menu, but it is a kind of salty plum lemonade. I love the sweet, sour, salty mix in the lemonade. But anyway, the meal really hit the spot, and it just seemed so warm and convivial inside, but yet I felt completely comfortable being alone. And I think because it was my last road trip of the year, my last night on the road of the year, I just felt so grateful for that just somewhere, a strip mall in Columbus, Ohio, you just find this place where you feel welcome and warm, and you just feel you love the people who run the restaurant. You love the other people inside, and by extension, you love America. And that's where I feel almost most patriotic, because we always get so down about all the things going on in this country, and often for good reason. But I think if you just stop and look, I'm just having this this restaurant right now, and it's wonderful. And I love these people, and I love everyone in it. And you can find those places all over the country. And it was the opening day of the NFL season, and I was handed homemade cookies with a football helmet cookies. I made football cookies on the way out, which I couldn't eat because I'm gluten-free, but it was just such a sweet touch that showed the kind of above and beyond care they put in at the restaurant. Then I'm in a parking lot of an airport hotel listening to the Eagles play the Patriots in my rental car as I'm packing up, and the sunset is going down over the Columbus airport. And none of this sounds fun, but I just found it so beautiful, and I was almost crying after that whole sequence of events. Just I love this. I love exploring these towns. I love minor league baseball. I love Columbus, Ohio. I love Vietnamese food. I love you.
Well, the thing I love about that story, on top of, just it's the quintessential Ben's Biz story, is like through our travels up to see minor league baseball games, and that's at the core of everything we do. And you've always talked about this, of seeing the country and experiencing American culture through baseball. But like, now you have a Vietnamese place in Columbus.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
isn't that just crazy to kind of think about? Like, on top of the ballpark guides, which tell people, hey, eat here, go here, stay here, whatever. It's just funny to think like there is a place that semi belongs to you now
Yeah,
that
and that writ
you would
large. I mean,
never have otherwise if not for baseball.
yeah, and so many of my favorite things could tie into people I know on the road, or long time, people in Louisville and Buffalo and Appleton and in all these places, people who I'm happy to meet when I come back 7 or 8 years later and catch up with, or maybe have a meal if we have the time. All these people, places, and things that, yeah, become kind of subsumed into my larger life experience is just something I'm so grateful for.
I like that. I like all this so far. I just want to shout out. I had Josh on my list as well, and so I just want to put that out there as a wild card. Another free space. We're all thankful for Josh, but Josh, we don't get to hear from regularly on the podcast, except in his role as the creator of Ghost of the Miners. But we don't get to talk to Josh. We kind of talk to the character Josh, but he truly is just the greatest human being, and so we all love Josh. I'm going to put that one just aside as a Josh acknowledgement. This will come as no surprise to anyone. One of my favorite things about minor league baseball every year, but especially in 2023, and as we continue to move into this new era in minor league baseball, is that teams are still doing a very good job in being creative with new alternate identities, new promotions, a lot of the things that I think people were worried about with the MLB takeover of minor league baseball. And, is it going to be homogenized, and is everything going to be, corporatized and ruined? Teams are still doing a lot of really cool and really creative stuff. And I'm thinking back to, all the different conversations that we had on the podcast this year, dating all the way back to, I want to say it was like maybe our first episode of the season. But it was when we talked about the Akron sauerkraut balls. And, it was our second straight year talking about an Akron food identity, because we talked about the JoJo's as well. But these things that minor league baseball teams introduce to the popular consciousness of people who follow minor league baseball, I never would have known about a sauerkraut ball or a JoJo or a garbage plate or whatever. And these teams across the country continue to express their own identities and express their communities' identities in a way that we don't see in other sports. And I find that very cool. I also find it very cool when other sports, you can tell, take their cue from minor league baseball, and teams will come up with a promotion that you think, oh yeah, I've seen that at a minor league park, or they'll suit up as an alternate identity, or they will do something that just feels very minor league inspired. I find that cool, and I think that's one of minor league baseball's biggest contributions to the American cultural landscape. Somewhat along that line, second is I love getting a chance to talk to the people around minor league baseball who make those things possible. Dan Simon, who we talked to a few weeks ago, created the Rome Emperors brand. It's so awesome to talk with someone like that about what the process is to create those things. Todd Radom, we've had on the show before. We talked with Greensboro about their new logos, not a rebrand, but a refresh, and what it took to come up with the new identity for the Grasshoppers. We got a chance to catch up with Tim Vangel, their general manager, about that. Those things are really neat because minor league baseball tries to stay fresh in certain ways, and it has to do it in a vein in which other sports, I don't really think, have to. And the creativity that goes into the identities of these teams is so amazing. And extending that point out, the operations of these teams as well. This year, getting a chance to talk with Clubbies. John Weinberg from Bowie joined us a little while ago. Merchandise managers. Luke Tracy was on the show last week to talk about how crazy his 2023 started, with having to essentially rebuild the entirety of the Akron Rubber Ducks team store. Minor league baseball front office employees are always among my favorite things, and they are the people who make the minor league baseball world function. And that's a pretty incredible thing. Number 3 is baseball's continuing recognition of its history and of its previously, I think, underserved fan bases. And I'm talking, of course, about Copa de la Diversión, which we continue to expand and enhance in 2023 and beyond. But also, this year, the acknowledgement of the Negro Leagues as a major league with the way that stats are taken into account and baseball's history is taken into account. My favorite element of Major League Baseball and Minor League Baseball's recognition of Black baseball history is the new game that's going to be played at Rickwood Field, which I almost called the Rickwood Classic, which isn't technically the Rickwood Classic. That used to be played there, the Birmingham Barons, at the oldest ballpark in the country that hosted Negro Leagues baseball, Rickwood Field in Birmingham, which opened in 1910. Next year, the St. Louis Cardinals and the San Francisco Giants are going to be playing there on June 20th. Birmingham will also play a game there against Montgomery. And the embrace of baseball's history by baseball right now, I find very cool, whether it's something like playing at Rickwood Field or playing at the Field of Dreams. That is something that's very important, because what baseball has over any other sport is history. And some people, I think, take that as a knock. I think other people who embrace it in the right way know that it is something to be appreciated and showcased. And I think baseball is doing a really good job with that. This one, kind of a cop-out. I guess it's sort of the free space, but it spins off, I think, of what you guys said. Our fans this year, I feel like we're so vocal with how much they enjoy the podcast. Every once in a while, and you guys both know it, I think we kind of all lapse into this, like, well, are we really moving the needle with the podcast? Are we really, are people interested in the things that we talk about? And even just over the last month, we have gotten so many amazing emails and such great feedback from people. We got an email the other day from Russell Aldridge. And Russell, I wanted to shout you out specifically. You just took the time to write, such a heartfelt and thankful and gracious email, giving us, I think, the sort of feedback that we hope people feel about the show. But to hear that from somebody is just, I really have a very difficult time putting into words when you do feel like, oh, yeah, there are people who enjoy what we do and we can be a bright spot for people. That's one of my favorite feelings in the world. We said last week or 2 weeks ago, Johnny Bolin, who is one of our longtime favorites, longtime listener of the podcast, was a guest on the podcast for the fan episode earlier this year. Johnny got in touch with us after the Gratitude Guys episode, which was really cool. And we're just so appreciative of everybody who tunes in. We've tried to keep this thing fresh. It's been 8 years, which is hard to believe, but the fact that people not only continue to tune in, but people continue to find the podcast. Russell said in his email, he really only started listening to us in the last couple of years. And that's just really amazing for us that we actually get a chance to have a positive impact, hopefully, on people's lives, not the people who are annoyed by the way every episode starts with me just rambling about some nonsense. But, I try to keep it somewhat in check. And the final thing for me, and this, talk about self-serving and a cop-out, but my favorite thing of 2023 in a work/baseball context was the World Baseball Classic in March, in which we got to see some of the most incredible baseball ever played. And I was the luckiest dude in the world that I got to be on the broadcast for a handful of those games. And, the Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout at bat immediately went down as one of the iconic moments in the history of the sport, a sport that goes back 150 years, nearly 150 in a professional context, but 150 plus in a creation and love context. It's pretty amazing that we all in March got to witness one of the all-time great moments in the history of baseball. And that's something that will forever be one of my favorite things. And I'm very lucky to have gotten to put that on my list in 2023. And I can't wait for the 2026 Classic either, because it's going to be awesome, especially if it comes down to Trout versus Ohtani on two different teams. I'm very excited about that.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, it's crazy to think about that was this year.
Yeah. Isn't that nuts?
It feels like a lifetime ago. I remember exactly where I was, but yeah, that was just in the spring.
Yeah, it was 9 months ago, which it feels like it could have been 5 years ago. And that's, how long we had to wait, actually a little bit longer between World Baseball Classics from the 2017 edition to this year. But yeah, it was only 9 months ago, which is nuts. That's, the same thing when I was thinking back on, okay, the Akron sauerkraut balls. Did we have that conversation in January, or was that in like 2018?
Yeah, sauerkraut balls are actually a New Year's tradition in
right, that's right.
So they announced it was a very rare January 1st press release because they were tying it into the fact that in Akron and Northeast Ohio, sauerkraut balls are eaten on New Year's Day. So the press release came out January 1st. So that must have been very early in 2023. But within the parameters of this segment, Tyler, it was a 2023
Thank
member.
goodness.
And then, of course, they played, I forget when, but in the summer, it made their actually on-field debut as the sauerkraut balls. And yeah, World Baseball Classic 9 months ago. I think we're seeing a little baby boom right now. We're calling them WBC babies being born.
Everybody was so excited. You know what? In Japan, you might not be wrong with the celebration that followed that win. Everybody was that excited over the wrap to the 2023 World Baseball Classic. All right. We also, in addition to just our favorite things baseball related, we also came up with a pop culture side to this thing, which Ben, was this your idea? This is a great way to end this episode.
Yeah, like all great ideas, it was mine.
It was either you or Josh. Lord knows it wasn't me or Sam.
Yeah.
So here are our 3 categories. Something I watched, which can be a movie, TV show, whatever. Something I read, and something I listened to or saw, being a musical endeavor, a concert, a new artist, something you came across and you fell in love with. We going in the same order? Sam, we kicking it off with you?
Let's go in reverse order.
Ooh, interesting.
What the hell?
Yeah. And I'd say you could make it 4. You could make listened and saw, like Saw being a live performance and Listen being an album, but however you do.
I am going to kick things off with watched, and I'm going to qualify this in a way in which I'm not saying that this is the greatest movie that I have ever seen, or it was the greatest movie even that I saw this year. But the movie that I'm going to put in the watch category is Oppenheimer, which sounds like, oh, of course, it's the nerd who loves history saw the big history movie in 2023. But the reason I'm putting Oppenheimer in that role is because it's the first time since the pandemic that I felt like, oh, I'm back at the movies. Like I've seen movies, I've been to movie theaters, and I have seen movies since, but Oppenheimer, being in a theater where it's loud and it's like a huge picture and you just feel immersed in something that takes you completely out of your life and the escapism of that was a feeling that I really, really missed. And I mean, it was a phenomenal movie. It was, like 95% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. Amazing movie, but that is my thing that I watched because of the experience that it gave me. The thing that I read is a book that I actually just finished, and it was recommended to me by none other than Josh Jackson, of course. But I told Josh as soon as it was over, I said, I think the highest compliment that I give a book is when I finish the book and think, all right, the only thing that I ever want to read is books exactly like this. And I'm going to be thinking about this one for like the next however many years. And it's a book called City of Thieves, which is, I think, a fairly recently published book, but it is a novel, a World War II novel by David Benioff. And it was actually published in 2008. Goodness gracious. According to the summary of it, it is a coming-of-age story, but it's set in the siege of Leningrad in Russia. And literally, the premise of the book, essentially, to not give you too many details, is 2 guys are sent on a mission to find a dozen eggs in the city of Leningrad during the siege of Leningrad. And it is one of the most delightful books, it sounds like such a dark story when you present it that way. It's one of the most, lovable, charming, delightful books that I've ever read. And so I recommend it highly. And finally, the thing that I listened to or saw, I didn't attend a ton of concerts in 2023, but I did come across a band that I fell in love with, which is called The War and Treaty. And I believe it's a husband and wife duo, and they play I don't know. It's kind of like sometimes they're a Southern rock sound. Sometimes they're very bluesy. Sometimes they're almost gospel sounding. I believe they were at the Country Music Awards, which made me feel kind of gross. I don't like country and I don't want to be one of those people who's like, no, it turns out that I'm a country fan at 38 years old. But I love the Warren Treaty. They were one of my highlights of 2023. Okay. Ben, you're up.
Okay. When in the watched category, you just think of movies right off the bat, and I saw some good movies this year for sure, but I'm so just disappointed that I've not seen Killers of the Flower Moon. I just don't even want to choose a movie. It came out, and Jill and I are like, wow, we have to get a babysitter and we have to go see it. And somehow that hasn't happened yet, and I don't even know if it's still in the theater, so that's bumming me out. But one thing I watched at home, it's not a movie, it's a 3-part HBO documentary that I thought was fantastic, is Telemarketers, if anyone's heard of that. It's a really interesting premise. It's about telemarketing. But basically, it was this guy who was still in his teenage years, always had a camera with him. And this is like in the early 2000s, 2004, 2005. He's kind of not in a great place in his life, getting in a lot of trouble, still a teenager. He starts working for CDG, this telemarketing company in New Jersey, and he just filmed in the office all the time. And this company hired, it didn't matter your criminal record, it didn't matter your drug usage, it just mattered if you could sell. So this like footage from a telemarketing company in the early 21st century is fascinating. But then Pat, one of the best sellers, he just more and more gets into like what a scam this all is, because they're selling what they're calling people about is support the police. So they kind of use intimidation to make people think they're with the police, to make it feel like it's in their best interest to support the police, but it's not really the police departments, it's like the patrolmen's benevolent society and stuff like that. So they were taking like 80-90% of the money and just keeping it for themselves and giving the rest to the patrolmen's organizations. But then time passes and this filmmaker connects with Pat, the top seller, who's had some down and out, years for sure. And then they go on a quest to kind of expose the industry and go through the halls of power. And it's not totally successful, but just this kind of down and out dude in New Jersey and a guy with a camera following him around, getting into the specifics of telemarketing and what a scam it is, and just the deep love for people in New Jersey who are more on the fringes. There's just no judgment there. Anyway, really good movie, or really good 3-part documentary. A book I read, it was actually in the beginning of the year, I believe like January, February. One of the best books I've read in a long time, The Terror. I became obsessed with it. It's about the Franklin expedition, a true life Arctic expedition that
putting this on my Goodreads list right now, by the way.
Oh, it's so good. Josh read it too, actually, on my recommendation. It's based on a true story and super, super well researched and so much historical detail. But there were 2 ships, the Terror being one of them, which is like, in retrospect, like, what do you think's going to happen when the Terror goes out to the Arctic? But the Terror,
we named this one the boat crash, and I can't believe it sank.
Yeah, exactly. It was the Terror and the Erebus, Erebus, and those ships were lost, never found. So the author Dan Simmons then kind of extrapolates what happens to them, adds a supernatural element, but it doesn't feel hokey. It just feels like an extension of the true terror they were already going through. And with the detail, the historical detail, it's just so immersive. It's one of the most grim books you'll ever read. Just things, you think things could not possibly be worse and have people still be alive, and then it just gets worse. But there's something in the organization and discipline of the ships and the men, and the captain, who is a real big part of the story, Crozier, that is also weirdly inspiring. So as much as it's one of the grimmest, literally darkest books you'll ever read, I was also just inspired by the resourcefulness of the men as they went through a true terror. And there's an AMC like 6-part adaptation, which is pretty well regarded, but I watched it so soon after reading the book that I was just too nitpicky of like, and also the men didn't seem all that cold in the AMC movie. And I was just like, no, there's no way your face would not be covered right now. I know that's good for acting, but like, come on. And, I was a little too nitpicky with all that.
You should be shivering more.
Yeah, exactly.
This dialogue is too easily understandable.
Yeah, and it wasn't even that understandable because there was a bunch of like British guys. I was like,
weird old British accents that are even
yeah,
more
I was like,
difficult to understand.
yeah, I was like, can you speak like English I can understand? I actually put subtitles on it, even though they were speaking English. But anyhow, it's still a pretty good adaptation. But the book I thought was just phenomenal. Um, for concerts, I saw a lot of good stuff. Not as many as I used to. Um, but the band I've seen the most in life is this Japanese psychedelic over the top rock group called Acid Mother's Temple. I saw them for the first time September 14th, 2001, 3 days after 9/11. I think I might have brought them up on this podcast before. And they're just professionals. They're warriors. They have just toured every single year since 2001 until the pandemic. So I had seen them basically every year since 2001, often 2 or 3 times a year, especially living in New York City, where they'd often start and end shows, tours in New York City, or play a Brooklyn show and a Manhattan show. I've seen them, I've lost count, but like 30 some times. But they didn't tour in 2020, 21, or 22. So for them to come back, it was just kind of like, they don't blow my mind the way they used to because I've seen them so many times. When I was younger, I was just like, oh my God, the riff is just dissolving and taking on molecular form and floating above me and then reassembling in new ways. And now I'm a little bit more like, yeah, they're just old pros out on the road. But just to see them after 4 years, it's just like, I don't know them personally, but just like, hello, old friends. And I think that speaks to, the beauty of live music when you get to see a band a lot of times and just appreciate their professionalism and hustle and grind. And then my favorite album of the year was Sleeper Mods, UK Grim, a British duo, one doing all the music, the other doing all the words. Almost a little bit of a hip hop element to it in the way the vocals are delivered, but they're more classified as like post punk compared to The Fall sometimes, things like that. But it is often quite vitriolic, often some political undertones, a lot of great takedown songs with just things that Jason Williams and the lead singer doesn't like. And as much as I try to be a positive, upbeat guy, my whole life, music I've gravitated toward has been more dark and a little bit angry. And I don't know, psychoanalyze it. But Sleaford Mods, UK Grim, start to finish, I think that album is phenomenal. And my favorite song being track 2, DIY, DIWHY. Do it yourself, but DIY. Anyway, Sleaford Mods, I love them. I saw them live too at Irving Plaza. Great show.
All right. So for me, watched, I was going to say Killers of the Flower Moon. I do think that is the best movie of the year. I think it's a Martin Scorsese masterpiece. It does a really good job of holding up the mirror to American history, and how certain people got their wealth in this country and what was stolen from in this case the Osage in Oklahoma, and the way it had happened and who is a villain and how they're treated, and how obvious it is that they're a villain, even if it's not obvious to themselves, but also the way it holds up a mirror to American storytelling in a way with the end. And I won't spoil that for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, but there's a very, very interesting ending that I think puts a certain spin on this, in a way that I won't say only Scorsese can, but it's very knowing that he's the one who gets to tell this story, as a guy from New York telling a story about basically, the destruction of the Osage in Oklahoma. So highly recommend it. But the one I'm going to specifically shout out here, just because I want people to see it, and I don't know how many of our listeners have, is Past Lives, which might be nominated for Best Picture this year. It's a debut film by Celine Song, basically about a Korean immigrant who comes to the United States through Canada. She grows up here. She gets married here. She lives in New York City, but she had a relationship with a young boy when she was young. They were close friends, and who knows what would have happened had she stayed in Korea. And then they meet up again. And then it's this whole discussion of like, who are we now? Are we still those little kids? Are we different now? Our paths are crossing again. Do we have this link? Is there something romantic here? Is there not? It's an opportunity for them to really, discover or investigate that in themselves in a way that a lot of us don't get, and has one of the best movie endings of all time. It's right up there with Casablanca, with like the perfect ending for me. So I highly recommend that movie if you haven't got a chance to see it yet. Past Lives. For read, this is isn't going to be groundbreaking, but I finally read It by Stephen King this year. I did it as part of a book club that I have with two of my best friends here in the city, Brittany and Jake. We always choose a big book and then read it separately, and then we find the kind of like with you and the Terror, Ben, watch the media that that is based on the book afterwards. So we got together and watched It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 afterwards. I definitely prefer the book just because it is so big and you're spending so much time with those characters, but you get to know them. I mean, Stephen King is fantastic at building a world and building characters that you care about. If I ever got on a plane and they said the pilot is Stephen King, I would immediately get off the plane because the man does not know how to land a plane to save his life. The ending still, I have problems with the ending as I do with most of his books, but I enjoy the journey so much. And after hearing about that book for years and years and years, I'm finally getting it to myself and feeling like I do have a relationship with the characters, not Pennywise, but all the kids and then the eventual grown-ups. That was really special to me. Listen to what?
Just you taking pains to say you don't have a relationship with Pennywise, like you get canceled.
I don't want anyone to think that I'm pro Pennywise on this podcast.
I just go into the sewers every once in a while, and
is that weird? Is that weird?
I don't think that's weird.
With my balloons?
Yeah.
Also, I think that we should just posit this to Josh Jackson to ask Stephen King, because they're, I assume, neighbors. There's only like 5 people in Maine, so yeah. I assume they live in short, distance from each other.
Yeah, they're both like aldermen on some town council in Maine.
They're allocating funds for like, oh, we have to get new garland for the city hall. Anyway, sorry, Sam.
No, that's perfect. Kind of sticking along those lines. Listen to a guy I got really into this year was Noah Kahn, who has really gained steam this past year. He was actually on SNL as the musical guest a few weeks ago. But he just has this kind of like Simon and Garfunkel feel to him, mixed with a little bit of Mumford and Sons to bring that kind of like modern folky feeling. But he's singing about New England and a lot of things that I can identify with, and like his famous song now is called Stick Season. And if you've grown up in New England and you know what it's like when all the leaves all of a sudden go away and what that feeling is like, it really speaks really well to that. I know people have sung about New England before. I grew up with the music of James Taylor, like I get it. But having somebody else kind of express what that modern feeling is like up there was something that really, it tickled me, but it also inspired me in a way of like, oh, this is something you can do. Like you can just write about this stuff. I know that's very first base and kind of obvious, but to hear him do it in that way has kind of got the itch back on me to like get into more creative writing and try to figure out how to share that experience for me. And then Saw is actually, I talked about seeing Radio City right now as I sit here, was Tyler Childers. I saw him play at Radio City this summer. And that was kind of important to me because I've been listening to him for a while now. And when I found out he was playing Radio City, you talk about like these parasocial relationships you have with artists. And I just thought, man, that's really cool for him. Like that must be one of the coolest moments of his career so far. And I don't know the guy. He grew up in Kentucky. Like we're a little bit close in age, but not, we don't share a lot of similar things. But I was just kind of like proud of him that he got that opportunity, and I wanted to be there to see what it was like. And you could see like how big his eyes got, just realizing how big of a room he's playing and the way he set up that show. It was him basically sitting down next to a black and white TV in a rocking chair for the first 3 songs, like watching Andy Griffith or something, and just singing songs, acoustic, just him and his guitar. And then after that, it opened up and there was like an entire orchestra, and you could tell he really wanted to knock it out of the park for something of that venue. So to see him do that in person on the first night was really special to me. And the cool thing for him next is that he's playing MSG in 2024. So he's continuing to level up, and I'm excited to see what he does next. But to check in with him, that was the first time I'd ever seen him live. Was a special experience. And I just love how creative it was for that setting.
I'm also just sitting here thinking, like, what other books did I read that I've forgotten about? What other movies and TV shows did I read that I've forgotten about? What other musical artists was I like, oh, hell yeah, I'm really into this person that I forgot about?
Well, the one that came to my mind, I almost was going to say this, Tyler, until you chose your movie, was American Prometheus, which
Oh
is the
yeah.
movie or the book that
That's on
Oppenheimer is
my
based off
that's on
of.
my want to read list. Which The
Yeah,
Terror was already on. I think Ben, you might have mentioned it before, and I was like, oh, I got to put this on here. So that's good. I might kick off 2024 with that actually.
yeah, and I actually highly recommend doing it the reverse way. We were talking about reading a book and then go watching the media. If you find something you really like and you find out it's based on a book, go to the book because there's more good stuff.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
already enjoyed the first part, like it
Right.
gets better and deeper, and
Right.
American Prometheus really does that. So then I've rewatched Oppenheimer since and done a lot of the Leo DiCaprio pointing like, hey, oh, that's from, this section.
Yeah. Ironic because he's in Killers of the Flower Moon,
I
which
know.
I read before I saw the movie. And I will say, I remember reading that book and thinking, like, man, there is a lot of stuff in here to put. Like, it is a very complicated story, and it's like, how do you capture all of this in the movie? And I think they do a very good job. And it is a pretty incredible movie. But yeah, there's, when Ben said like, oh, it's a multi-part documentary that I watched earlier this year, I was like, I know I've watched a bunch of those, and like, what have I forgotten that I saw? But now I want to check out the telemarketer thing.
Yeah, it's great. One thing I do, it's actually because I'm working from home today, I have it here on my desk, is I always want to write more outside of work than I ever do. But I always just keep a little, right now it's a blue book, but it's just filled with like each page is just like, you know, albums that I added to my collection or movies, books. So I just kind of have like a cultural log that I did kind of flip through before we did this segment. And it does help jog the memory because a year is a long time and it's very easy when you look back. I do think there's a recency bias for everyone where it's just hard to keep track of everything or you forget, was that this year or last year? And then something you enjoyed in the last 1 or 2 months ends up being what you talk about at the end of the year. So it can
That
be
is a
tough
really
to
good point. Because I was just looking back through my list of books that I read this year, and one of the ones that I also remember just blowing my mind was Solito, which is an incredible book by Ivan Zamora, I believe is his name. And it's the story of it's a memoir of this kid's journey as an unaccompanied minor back before that was even a term. This is, I believe, in the early 2000s, making his way from his home in Honduras, I believe, is where he grew up, and making his way to the United States with, a group of people that he didn't know and people who kind of became his family on that journey. Yeah. And so I'm assuming, oh yeah, I remember that thing that I watched back in March. That was great. And I don't have any recollection of what it was. So I'm sure there was a lot. If I was still on Twitter, I would just start a thread where I was ticking off all the things like, oh yeah, I remember when I watched that and it was really good.
Well, Ben, you immediately made me think of, I think it's Steven Soderbergh, like has a running list that he publishes every year.
Yeah, I read that recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Of everything that he's read or watched.
Oh,
and it's
man,
just
that's a
fascinating
great
to see,
idea.
One of the most brilliant directing minds we have, what he's taking in and what that leads to what he's doing next or what he's doing currently. So I kind of want to see the Little Blue Ben's book published.
Yeah.
The little Blue Ben's book. Yeah. This is something, I mean, I've always been pretty voracious in my outside interests, and I used to try to incorporate more of it into my writing, especially in the Ben's Biz blog days, but I often feel like I'm lacking a forum, and often I feel almost like this segment now. I always feel a little sheepish or indulgent in a minor league baseball forum, just talking about the things I like outside of minor league baseball. And every year it seems I'm like, I got to start something at this point. What is it, like a Substack, but like something that I can just remove myself from Ben's Biz and just be Ben and talk about other things and share those things and maybe not necessarily be too concerned who the audience is, and because there's just so much to write about and explore. And then it doesn't even have to be categorized like movie, book. There's just so many things, just random experiences you have, buildings, a sign that you saw is funny. There's just so many things that we think about, create little interesting riffs in our head and then just don't have a space for it. And I think I've been lacking some outlets for a long time. So I'd like to get better at that. New Year's resolutions. First episode of 2024. What are we trying to do in 2024?
One thing that I will say that I would like to do to kick off 2024 is to try some sauerkraut balls. So, Ben, you're a mover and shaker in the industry. Will you find someone in Akron who will ship the three of us some sauerkraut ball? I would love to kick off my new year by
and to one of your points,
figuring out what sauerkraut balls are.
Ohio delicacies.
Yeah.
I know Columbus isn't like Northeast Ohio, but you clearly have connections.
No, let's do it. Hey, Jim Fander, president of the Rubber Ducks.
Yeah, we need to make this happen. This is how we must kick off our year.
Yeah. Luke Tracy, we just featured you on the podcast. A little quid pro quo. Send us some sauerkraut balls.
I like that idea. Well, please get in touch with us and let us know, even if it's just going back to last month's episode, what you're thankful for or your favorite things of 2023. And they can be baseball related or they can be life related. Podcast@milb.com. We always love hearing from people who take the time to tune in and get in touch. And obviously, we love you and we appreciate you tuning in week to week over the last 8 years. And we'll be back after the start of 2024. Hopefully, having gorged ourselves on sauerkraut balls, we will be back in 2024. What's the condiment that you go with sauerkraut balls? I know we had this conversation. There's like a spicy ranch or something that goes with it. I feel like some brown mustard would be like some, beer mustard.
It seemed like you could be, what condiments you like in life. They might work on a sauerkraut ball. I believe marinara was a big one, but
interesting.
But you could also definitely do some ranch style or aioli style, dipping sauce, and I'm sure a good brown mustard with a little spice, a little horseradish kick would work as well.
I like that.
We'll find out ourselves one of these days.
Yeah, we'll learn soon enough. All right, we're going to step aside. Josh Jackson swings by with the final Ghost of the Minors of 2023, and then we are back to wrap it up. Coming up next.
Nerds! Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast. Here's a New Year's resolution. Ditch the get-rich-quick schemes and learn how to invest your money so it lasts longer than your new gym membership. NerdWallet's trusted experts will shovel through today's avalanche of financial misinformation and set up future you for success in 2024. Learn about budgeting tips to melt away post-holiday debt, whether you should buy a home or wait for mortgage rates to warm up, and how you can build a cozy credit score. Ditch the financial frostbite and make smarter decisions this year. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you another thrilling edition of Ghosts of the Minors. Now, here's your correspondent and host, Joshua Jackson.
Welcome back to Ghosts of the Minors, in which all of you out there in Radio Land must identify the legitimate historical ball club or player hiding amidst the fraudulent pair. One set out to steal the show on the diamond. The others were set out as fugazis on this show. In the last segment, I asked you which of the following minor league baseball players did at one time exist. A. Franklin Hollers. B. Clarence Hoots. C. Ovid Shrieks. The answer is who? Hoots? I will say it. B. Clarence Hoots. A pitcher who announced his presence in pro ball with Wichita Falls down in Texas and was a team player in the 3I League across 3 seasons in the Roaring Twenties. Hoots' name was good for a hoot from the get-go. Why, in March 1923, as soon as he got a deal with the Texas League Spudders, a newspaper in Hamilton, Ohio did not stutter in reporting Clarence Hoots has signed with Wichita Falls. He will come into prominence whenever it is necessary to revile the umpire. But he never came into prominence at all with the Spudders, sputtering out in the Texas League, but butting up with the Bloomington Bloomers in the 3I League, that is, the Illinois-Indiana-Iowa League. In relaying the Spudders' acquisition of one Hippo Hodges from Bloomington in June 23, the Wichita Daily Times of Wichita Falls mentioned that Hoots had been going good with the Bloomers over the past couple months. But Clarence Hoots' career didn't clarify into something worth hooting about until 1926, when Hoots helped hurl the Springfield Senators to the 3I League pennant, co-leading the Loop with 19 victories, along with Peoria's Hal Smith, Decatur's Elmer Ambrose, and Terre Haute Carl Boone and William Clark. Hoots was back with Springfield in 27, but the Senators' leadership faltered and the club fell to 3rd place. And he returned to the team at least in the spring of 28, but after that his trail in history grows cold. Although, in the summer of 29, the Decatur Review did run a story about a local man named Clarence Hoots luring his flying squirrel home from the house of one Ralph Adams via the use of a popcorn popper. What? But as for what happened to his baseball career, the record has yet to be recovered from Ralph Adams' attic. And that's how Clarence Hoots was last heard of. Now, on to the question for next time. Which of these teams was quite industrious in the minors of yesteryear? A, the Lancaster Fultons. B, the Pawtucket Slaters. C, the Dearborn Buicks. Want to know the answer? Modernize. Or tune into the next Ghost of the Miners. But for now, you'll have to excuse me. My producer Ben Hill is going out caroling, and I've got to fill the bucket by my window.
Huge thanks to Josh for stopping by. Josh has a new puppy and a new kitten, and I should probably have noted that, like, getting pictures of Addie, the puppy, and Olive, the kitten, that's one of my latest and most favorite things of 2023. So if you are in need of some of that content, go follow Josh Jackson on the social medias. Before we get out of here, dudes, what are you doing for the holidays? Obviously next week, a very quiet time of the year for baseball, especially, but really for the working world at large. What do you guys got going on?
Yeah, the big thing for me will be I'm going home to Massachusetts on Saturday. Christmas is on Monday, and then on the 27th, my sister is moving house. She's moving one town over in Northeast Connecticut. Won't say the town, don't want to give away too much, but she's moving one town over to the second house that her family will have lived in. She's moving with 3 kids. So I don't know if I'm going to be on moving duty, if I'm like getting all the heavy stuff and putting it into the U-Haul, or if I'm on uncle duty and just corralling the kids and getting them out of the way. But that's going to be a big part of my holidays, getting them moved. And we will have one final Christmas in their current house, which I think is exciting and a good way to leave things off. But that's going to be the bulk of my break, I think, until I come back here for New Year's. Ben, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm a child of divorce, and Jill, my fiance, her parents are divorced. And so without getting into the specifics, we have a lot of like factions to juggle every holiday. So we're already in the midst of that now. I've already done a few visits or been visited. But we're seeing family on my end in the Philadelphia area, or actually Philadelphia proper, going to Western Massachusetts where Jill's family's from. But it's been important to us, and what I look forward to the most is to get home at some point on Christmas Eve and then spend the entirety of Christmas Day like in our apartment with our tree, solidify traditions and have like a little family Christmas on Christmas Day at our home. Is really important to me. And then we'll be back from all the running around by hopefully, I think, on the 29th or 30th. I was talking to Sam yesterday, and I actually brought this up, but I've done the polar bear swim like every year for 21 years now at Coney Island, the greatest place in the world. So I always look forward to that on New Year's Day. Love getting in the water on New Year's Day and starting the year off that way. And I was trying to convince Sam to do it yesterday, and I think he's open to it. I already have a memo on my phone. Text Sam on December 30th to try to get him to come out. So if he doesn't have plans with Pennywise, then
which is always a gamble.
Yeah.
Me and Pennywise are both going to emerge from the sea.
Yeah, coming the other.
One of us will go in, 2 of us will come out, and I won't explain further.
It's a big day to be hanging out in the sewers. That's one of those days, just a beautiful winter day to be hanging out in the sewers. That's what I would do on whatever given day I could hang out with Pennywise. I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing, even though nobody cares or asked.
Well, I was gonna ask, but you were talking, so I was waiting for a break. Tyler, what are you doing for the holidays?
I just want to point out one of my favorite expressions people from the East Coast, Sam, you did this a moment ago, when you say my sister's moving one town over. I love that. Where it's like, oh, it's the next town over. And I just love like the mental image that I have of like all these towns just like stacked up, which is kind of how it is. But
Yeah,
I just,
I mean,
for
that's-
whatever reason, I've always loved it. It's like, oh no, it's like 2 towns over. I love that expression. I think it's great.
I never thought about it that as being a Northeast thing, but yeah, sure.
It's fun. I don't know. I'm sure it's like maybe like in probably California, they probably maybe you say that where the towns are all butted up against each other. But I love it. It's so charming. I am headed to, much like Ben, I too am a child of divorce, but my parents, they don't care about what I do for Christmas. So they always go to New York to see my sister and her family. And hey, I'm a married man now, so I'm going with my wife. We're gonna go see her family in Texas, and I'm really just trying to eat a whole lot of like barbecue and grilled meats. That's kind of my whole, like, going to Texas. I'm like, wow, we're not going to do like, the big traditional Italian Christmas dinner that I would do with my family in New York. Why don't I just try to detour our road trip to go buy Cooper's, and stuff barbecue into my face or whatever. So we're going to do that. And then I got to be back. We have a college basketball trip. We leave on the 28th for a road game. Then we get back on the 30th. And then we have a game on New Year's Eve in the afternoon. So I'm planning on, I have a functioning fireplace in my house right now, which is very cool. So I think we're just going to like start a fire and sit in the house, start a fire in the fireplace. We're not going to start a fire in the house. But that seems like a good chill, terrific 38-year-old's New Year's Eve. I don't want to be cool on New Year's Eve anymore. I've never have been, so I'm not going to try to start now. But that's like an exhausting holiday to me. So sitting around ringing in 2024, hopefully crushing some sauerkraut balls.
I was going to say, yeah, between the the diving into the sea in Coney Island and the sauerkraut balls on the day.
Yeah.
I think at our ages now, January 1st is a bigger day than December 31st.
That's very possible. All right, everybody. Well, a huge thanks again to all of you for hanging out with us on the Show Before the Show podcast. And we will say goodbye. Huge thanks to Josh Jackson for stopping by with Ghosts of the Miners. For Benjamin Hill and Sam Dykstra, my name is Tyler Mon. Thanks, everybody, for being with us for another year. We'll catch you in 2024.
Let Tend Dental make your dream smile a reality. We offer a variety of top-rated treatments, including Invisalign aligners. And for a limited time, Tend is offering $750 off orthodontic treatments. Offer valid through January 31st, so don't wait. Visit hellotend.com/sale. That's hellotend.com/sale. And book your free consult today. 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 Free consult.